What's up, weirdos? Have you ever sat down and watched one of those whimsical animated movies that you watched as a kid and thought to yourself, man, I really want a 2-hour-long live-action slop adaptation of this with terrible production quality? Wait, you haven't thought of that? Well, that means this conversation's gonna get a lot more awkward, cause I already ordered like 50 of them. If you're someone who hasn't been stranded on a deserted island for a Mr. Beast challenge, you know exactly what I'm talking about in today's video. Live action adaptations have been around for way too long, and I find it very interesting how they've become such a core part of American cinema. And to be clear, remakes are nothing new in the industry, as Disney has been making them since the 90s with The Jungle Book and 101 Dalmatians, which were created around 30 years after the originals were made. But in the past 10 years, there's been such an uptick in these live-action remakes being made to the point where you can almost guarantee that at least one will come out every year to take up space during a holiday. And the main question again is why, which is really easy to answer actually. It's called nostalgia. Nostalgia is the main appeal of all of these remakes, and honestly, it's been a plague on the industry for the past decade, and it is not going away. I think the big change in how nostalgia is used in the marketing of these remakes started back when the Cinderella remake was coming out. I also clearly remember when the Cinderella remake was being made and thinking, hey, you know, that's kinda cool. I really hope they're not just doing this for money and aren't gonna start pumping these out every year. Oh, hey, Dumbo, I didn't know you were there. What's up, buddy? The entire marketing campaign for all of these modern remakes is all about reminding you that this movie is like the old movie, but newer, which makes complete sense from a marketing standpoint. But there's a couple problems with this. The first is that when Universal suddenly decides to make a live-action remake of How to Train Your Dragon, they can't really pull the nostalgia card because there's not really that much nostalgia for that movie. It's still thought of as a modern movie, similar to Kung Fu Panda. Are we gonna make a live-action remake of that too now? The other problem with the marketing is that none of these movies are adding anything new to the source material. And when they do try adding something new, it just worsens the product because the only reason it was added in the first place was to pad the runtime. For example, in 2023, the live-action Little Mermaid went to extreme lengths to develop Prince Eric's character, going so far as to give him his own song, specifically written for this movie. And you can definitely tell. It's very generically written and has very uninspired composition, and overall feels completely detached from any of the other songs in the movie. The development that they do give him is that he's the heir to the throne of his Kingdom Island thing, and he's extremely concerned with the ever-evolving culture surrounding his island, and wants to make sure that his island kingdom is not left behind. But they don't really go into depth about why or what culture is evolving in the surrounding islands surrounding their kingdom, and that's probably because it has something to do with slavery. They also go out of their way to show how good of a leader he is because he cares about his men. Hey, listen, I've never been a prince, captain, or king, but I'm pretty sure caring about your men is like the base level of being a good leader. Is that just a rare trait amongst your island? Are you guys just terrible people? I'm gonna assume so. But all of this character development doesn't really matter at the end of the day because this live-action version of Eric is auraless and risless compared to the animated version. Eric in the original is completely fine. I'm not against giving him more development because I'd argue he's one of the less developed characters in the original. I'd even go as far as to say, yeah, sure, give him a song, but he doesn't need to be forcibly inserted into this B-plot of the movie when everything that he talks about and wishes for can be resolved in one scene. Keep in mind, the original is barely 90 minutes long, and this new one is over 2 hours long because we need Aquafina to tell us about the scuttlebutt.
Remember the swamp? Remember my song in the swamp when I was like, whap, chicka, whap, whap, chicka, whap.
I remember.
Fucking gun in my...
Want me to kill myself?
Stop it!
Which is this?
But you're probably thinking, surely they didn't get rid of anything from the original film and adapted everything one for one that was in that movie. Well, guess what? Remember that scene in the original where it's Sebastian versus that chef and is personally my favorite scene in that movie? Well, they just decided to cut it out for some reason because again, we gotta have Aquafina yelling about the scuttlebutt.
I got that scuttlebutt.
This other small little thing that these movies do is completely misunderstood misunderstand the original themes of the original movie. And I was lying because this is the biggest crime of all. Let's finally talk about the Lilo and Stitch remake. Remember how in the original it was all about belonging and family, accepting what you lost and not letting go of what you still have? Ohana means family, and family means no one gets left behind. Psych! Ohana actually means that Lilo is going into the foster care system so Nani can go to college to study fish, because that's empowering. The absolute disdain that this movie has for family is pathetic and disgusting. Don't you think it would be more empowering for them to stay together in spite of the systems that have been put in place to tear them apart? Don't you think that is a powerful enough message to tell kids that their family bonds are stronger than anything or anyone that tries to oppress them? Nah, because any law-abiding citizen knows that the greatest form of empowerment is cooperating with the government, because the government has never done anything wrong. In this attempt to empower young girls to follow their dreams, they've ended up stripping Nani of all of her autonomy. The struggle to raise Lilo is never really illustrated as that big of a deal. She kind of just is like, whatever about it. And to fill the void of no tension in this movie, they give Nani the trait of really wanting to go to college, which is a funny idea because in the original movie, this idea was already illustrated, but it's done subtly. In the background of Nani's room, you can see various trophies and memorabilia back when she was a surfer, and it is conveyed through these objects that she had the opportunity to go pro, and she didn't because she wanted to take care of Lilo, because Ohana means family. The other thing that the remake does is get rid of all of the sub-themes in the original that could be seen as offensive. The theme encapsulating tourism's effect on the locals is completely removed. For example, this guy is a white guy who's eating ice cream, and they have changed him just to be a local having a snow cone. Surely this has no consequences or impact on the other themes of the movie, right? Wrong. It actually does. In the original, the reason this guy is white is because he's a tourist, which is the reason Lilo is taking a picture of him. He is a new, strange person that randomly showed up and will inevitably leave because everyone leaves. Lilo is a child. She doesn't really understand tourism. She doesn't understand why people are just showing up in masses and then leaving unannounced. And that frustrates her. We even see how tourism affects Nani trying to get a job, because at first she's working at a tourism trap and then is applying to new jobs, and she's finding it very difficult because the tourism season is almost over. Subtle world building, I know, crazy. Also, side note, they made David a dweeb in this movie. I don't know why. He was fine in the original. Why are we changing this? What are we doing? Like, yeah, he was nervous asking Nani out on a date because that's what normal people do when they're asking people out. And it's not like Nani wasn't into him. The only reason she didn't go on the date with him was because she was prioritizing taking care of Lilo. Apparently romance is too woke now, and we can't have any of that, so I'll just kill myself. I hate to do it again, but I gotta do it just this once. It's just gonna be 5 minutes. We're gonna go back to the Little Mermaid, all right? Hey, stop yelling, all right? It's gonna be 5 minutes, it's gonna be completely fine. Along with misunderstanding the themes of the original, a lot of these remakes tend to just lose a bunch of context in translation. For example, Under the Sea is possibly the biggest offender of this idea. In the original, Sebastian is trying to convince Ariel that the sea is better than the land. But in the remake, Ariel just seems to be agreeing with him and vibing on a turtle. You also can tell that they just had no idea what to do with any of the fish during the live action remake. In the original, all of the fish are playing music and dancing and making weird noises, because in order to make a movie, you have to blend both song and visuals together to make a movie. But in the remake, they just got the fish dancing around because they don't know what to do with their hands. They also change how the songs are sung in the new one, which this is my most petty point, but I gotta get it through.
Out of the sea, wish I could be.
So in the original, the way that lyric is sung and performed perfectly illustrates how Ariel is desperate to see land and explore a new world. She's surrounded with so many trinkets and treasures, but she's never actually gone up and seen the real thing. But in the remake, this is just an opportunity for Halle Bailey to just show off how good she is at singing.
Wish I could be
Alright, yeah, I get it, sister. Queen out or whatever, alright? On top of this mistake, do you remember how Scuttle and Ariel had this shared love of exploration and seeing the new world? And Scuttle would find things, make up a name, and make up its purpose just to see Ariel because he enjoyed her presence. But in the remake, Scuttle is just completely stupid because, again, we need Scuttlebutt.
I got that scuttlebutt.
The reason I haven't talked about the live-action How to Train Your Dragon remake coming out soon is because A, as of this recording, I haven't seen it, and B, it really just looks like a shot-for-shot remake of the original, which I guess is the best they can do. There's not much these movies have done to evolve the genre of live-action remakes. Like, it's just the same movie, but more gray and less exciting. I am in my car right now because I just got done watching How to Train Your Dragon. The live action, of course. And you're probably thinking, Andrew, were you right? Are you a prophet? Well, yes, I am, because it is just a shot-for-shot remake. Minus like a couple scenes, this is just the same movie. They barely touch anything, they don't try to change it or evolve it at all. They're just like, hey, let's do the same thing. Again, minus a couple scenes, this is the same movie, but I'll talk about those scenes that they cut out eventually, but we'll get there. And this is where I bring up the fact that, again, a lot of this movie is lost in translation when you translate it to live action. There's a lot of shots in this movie where you can obviously tell that the character or dragon is supposed to make an exaggerated face, but they kind of just stare dramatically in the distance. And I understand why they don't overact, because if they did, it'd feel like I'm watching one of those weird cringe double speed TikToks. So honestly, you can just cut that weird pause in between those scenes. Just cut it. You don't need it. This movie has a lot of Filoni syndrome. And when I say Filoni syndrome, I'm comparing this to Ahsoka. If you don't already know, the director of the live action is the same who did the animation, and you can definitely tell, and it's very obvious that this guy mainly directs animated movies. Ahsoka also has the problem where two characters will stare dramatically in the distance while nothing happens for 30 seconds. And that's because these directors don't know how to direct actors. Because a lot of these characters just feel like caricatures of their original character when they're talking. Like, listen, these guys are trying their best with these characters, but these roles just weren't written for live action. Whoever is telling you what to do is doing a bad job. To speak on the dragons feel a lot less lively in this version. And that's because in the animation, you can get away with making them a lot quicker, a lot more expressive. They can jump places really quick without having it look very detached from reality. And in the live action, they're very slow. They feel slow. They feel bogged down by, you know, reality. I completely forget all the names of the dragons other than Toothless, but this fire dragon in the original had a lot of life to him. He got that spunk. But in the live action, he looks like the most generic dragon ever made. And that's because all the dragons feel like they have the same texture to them. Toothless used to be very, very dark. In some shots, he used to look like just a black silhouette of what a dragon looks like. But in the live action, he just has too much texture, and it just looks like they turned RTX on, and they kind of Minecraft him, and that's kind of tragic to me. He used to have this very black sheen about him whenever he would move, where like you would only see reflections on his body to indicate where things were. And now all of that is lost because now it's all just textured with default Dragon Scales 2 option in Unreal Engine. Along with that, I can say the same thing for the character design. All the character designs are, sure, accurate, but that doesn't mean they're good. You see this a lot with comic book fans, where they desperately want their character to look exactly like he does in the comic book in the live-action movie, but the problem with that is that only works under very specific circumstances. You have to be incredibly campy for that to work. And when a movie that tries to take itself seriously tries to do that, it ends up looking god-awful. And that's how I would describe this movie. Sure, the ragtag group of Vikings looks like how they do in the actual movie, but these guys don't look like real people. Hiccup's dad is just wearing big clothes. It doesn't have the same effect. And to specifically talk about the dad, there's a lot that I think is lost in the meaning of his character in this movie. Specifically the conversation where his dad comes into his room and Hiccup and his dad talk about how Hiccup's been doing pretty good at dealing with these dragons. And in the animated version, Stoic is desperately shoving himself into Hiccup's room because he can barely fit because he's a giant man and Hiccup's like 20 pounds soaking wet. That moment is completely lost in the new version. In the new version, he just walks in his room and they start talking. It doesn't have the same effect. If you try to just remake the movie one for one, it just ends up being artistically worthless because it's not doing anything new. And it doesn't even try to improve the original. So how do you do this? How would you make this movie and make it actually good while respecting the original and making it an actual piece of art worth talking about? I'd argue that you would make it more grown up. No, I'm not saying that because live action is more gritty and realistic than quirky kids animation. What I'm saying is the audience, aka me, who grew up with the original, obviously has aged up a bit and doesn't want to rewatch another kids movie. So what I would do is I would make it grow up with its audience, maybe introduce more mature themes, maybe show what these Vikings are doing to these dragons and make it absolutely horrific. That would even further make Hiccup's choice to protect them that much more hitting. You could also maybe make the writing a bit more subtle because I think the weakest part of the original is how unsubtle and expository some of the dialogue is. Like that intro scene is just exposition and it's kind of cringe. For example, one of the scenes that I love that I wish had no dialogue is the scene after the great flight that Hiccup and Toothless have, where they're just kind of chilling on a rock and some baby dragons come over. One of the baby dragons realizes that Hiccup isn't a threat and cuddles up next to him. And Hiccup has this great epiphany about how these dragons are just simple creatures. They don't want to fight. They are not what they said they are. And we can get all of that without Hiccup speaking. But then Hiccup speaks and just tells us what he's thinking.
Everything we know about you guys is wrong.
And it doesn't really hit hard as I think it could if it had no dialogue. If I were to remake this movie, I would just take that dialogue out and then boom, it's a better scene now. But growing up with the audience will never, ever, ever happen because we must maintain the status quo. Star Wars is never allowed to evolve, and Spider-Man is never allowed to be happy. Yeah, it's 80 degrees in my car. I'm sweating, so goodbye. Another thing they changed for some reason is when Hiccup and Toothless are doing their first flight and Hiccup falls off. In the original, it's an incredibly visceral scene. Toothless ripping through the air at violent speeds, Hiccup desperately trying to get back to Toothless to put his harness back on. All of this elevated by the soundtrack that is going completely haywire due to the chaotic nature of the scene, which then amplifies all of the sound effects that are going into this scene. The soundtrack mimicking the sound effects of the wind, creating an environment. But in the remake, all of that is gone because they decided to put choir music behind it. And this choir music just detaches you from the entire sequence. It's just such an odd thing to do. Why would you do this? You don't even have to change anything. And I think the funniest thing to me is that they're also remaking the behind the scenes material. And honestly, I almost respect it. For example, look at this clip from when the original came out.
He's cool looking. He's kind of lizard, kind of dragon, kind of cat, kind of dog. You'll recognize him. You'll see your loved animals in him, and you'll see a fierce guy in him. I think the animators especially did an amazing job of taking this guy and making him magical and ferocious and warm.
Now let's see Dean talking about the new remake.
The hope was that as people watched the movie, they would realize, oh, my cat does that, or I've seen my dog do that exact same thing.
Yeah, Dean, it's almost like you guys did this 15 years ago. You're not doing anything new. You're not slick, Dean.
I didn't want to be one of those disappointing remakes that we're all accustomed to, and I don't like the trend. Like, as an animator, I don't like seeing animated classics being replaced by lesser than live action films.
Then why did you do it, Dean? It's probably because you like money. The only way I can legitimize these live action remakes is if you're making it with the sole intent of adapting it for a new audience. Netflix's One Piece was actually pretty good. I really enjoyed it. I haven't seen or read the source material because that manga is longer than the Bible, but from what I can tell, the characters and story are treated with some level of respect. And it's really funny how this doesn't happen every time, and that's because studio execs want to sanitize their own product to make sure that it doesn't offend anyone. All that anti-colonialism from the original, Nah, we can't have that. Too woke. Hey, remember when the alien creature dresses up in a skirt and a wig? Nah, too woke. Remember how Ohana means family? Nah, too woke. We have to neuter our own messages because how dare we be offensive to other people? We can't have that. That doesn't make money. Movies were made so that the audience can sit there and stare at a screen while we distract them for 2 hours. Also that they can forget what they spent their money on. Movies are meant to be a slot machine that never stops, because if we stop, then people will find out that we have nothing of value to give them in the first place. The success of Lilo and Stitch really bothers me, and I really hope that it doesn't inspire any more people to make any more remakes, considering how bad the Snow White movie did. But it feels like we're just reliving everything that happened with The Lion King. And it sucks because no one will ever have any amount of nostalgia for these movies, because they completely disown everything that made the original great. I feel bad for kids growing up right now that are being told that the greatest form of empowerment is just being employed to a system that doesn't care about them. I hate that we're living in a world where kids' only form of modern entertainment is just a slot machine that churns out content for the sake of babysitting children because their parents don't care. But hey, that's just me, I guess.